Good evening and welcome to this very special occasion that we have the privilege of hosting at the Observer Research Foundation as a think tank that is completing its third decade. What better way to celebrate it than discuss a book? And we will be discussing perhaps the most awaited book in the foreign policy realm this evening, and we are delighted to have Dr. Jaishankar with us, Indian External Affairs Minister, but I would argue also a think tanker by design. Discuss with us the contours of his book. But before I dive into what promises to be a fascinating conversation, all masked up, let me first request the Foreign Minister to respond to three of his friends who joined us at the very beginning of this segment, speaking about your work.
Well, Samir, good to be here and good to join you for this event. First of all, I'd like to thank all three of them. They were very generous with their words and their comments. Two of them, in fact, coincidentally were with me today, just now, at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting, digitally. It was interesting, listening to them, because in many ways, each one in their own way touched upon something which is in the book. Maurice, the Australian Foreign Minister, spoke about the Australia way. And I pointed out this will now be an era of middle powers like Australia, for example. Speaker Nasheed spoke about the Indo-Pacific and he's in many ways the embodiment of the determination to combat climate change, and that's the big global issue. And again, I've brought out why today global issues should have a greater space. And of course, Vivian, the Singapore Foreign Minister, Singapore is the crossroads of Asia, certainly in many ways increasingly of the world. And if you look at the big debate going on in the world, that debate is very much on the stress on globalization, and I think you have someone like him comment on that. And before you actually do that dive which you are speaking of, I want to just make one comment. I was very touched by what Minister Balakrishnan said about former President Pranab Mukherjee, and he pointed out that he had actually met him in my house, and Pranab Mukherjee ji was my minister. He was an extraordinary person. Everybody recognizes it. And I must say, and he had an enormous love of books. It was anybody who knew him even slightly knew that. And I would say today, if there was one person I would have liked to sit and discuss the book with, it would have been him. And I would miss that.
On the former president, since you have worked with him, what is one single memory of him, of his decisions, of his work that you carry with you?
Well, I have many memories. One single one, I would say probably, during the nuclear deal, the Hyde Amendment had passed, and there was a very heated debate in this country because the legislation had a lot of language out there, and essentially, I'm not using his exact words, but essentially he looked at the whole thing and said, listen, we have the substance. So there's a lot of English before the substance. So take the substance and forget the English. So he knew, he was very hard-headed, he was very nationalistic, he recognized the importance of that inflection point at that time. A very exceptional person.
English. I think Indians get too absorbed in English, but today we are going to actually dive into lots of English that has been produced by you. In the India way, strategy for an uncertain world. So before I go into some of the issues you've engaged with, why did you write this book? This is not a memoir.
No,
so
not at all.
Why is it that you've written this book?
I wrote this book, and I've explained it in the book, that because the world I grew up in, through my entire career, was, I could see it change dramatically before my very eyes. So that sense of change was so strong that I felt that it needed to be explained. So that was one reason. The second was I saw my own country change in this period, that our capabilities were more, our confidence was more, our aspirations were higher, and in many ways the society was very, very different. So I felt on the one hand it was important to put out a narrative, that was one reason I wrote it, and the other I actually feel that we must have objective, dispassionate debates on foreign policy. And I felt okay, this could help, not trigger it because it's already a live debate, but certainly add to it and give it angles from a practitioner's perspective which may actually be helpful for people both in theory and in practice.
So what is the book engaging essentially? As it hits the stand tomorrow and as it's available online to those who want it, what should they expect from this book?
Well, look, in a way, Samir, this is all about the big picture. Okay, this is a big picture in terms of the repositioning of America, the rise of China, Europe after Brexit, where Japan is going, what's happening in the Indian Ocean. So I've taken up all those issues. But in many ways, it is also about the fact that to make people think that the assumptions on which we believe the world affairs were being run may or may not be valid anymore, that the rules that we took as a given will or will not work anymore, that in fact in many ways the nature of power has changed. Initially we thought of power certainly during the Cold War era as with a very strong military connotation. Then it became in many ways soft power, some economic issues. But I would say today trade is one form of power, investment is one, connectivity is one, technology of it. So as I say, the nature of power has changed, and most important, I think people need to understand the world of agreement. In a way, agreements are over. It's now a world of convergences. That we, even countries which are close will not agree on everything, and even countries with whom you're not close but with whom you agree on some things, you can work with them. So in a sense we are moving to a more practical world, a more pragmatic world, but a world of margins and hedging and issues, and it's therefore quite different.
I want you to hold that thought. I just want to make a quick announcement for our viewers who have joined us online. So I believe we have folks from over 50 countries who are with us this evening. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. If you do want to participate, please post your questions for the Foreign Minister on the message box. We will try and get to them as the evening unfolds. Also, this is not a press conference or a press briefing on some of the few things India is currently responding to in terms of its international interactions. It's more about the book. Try and focus on what you would like to know from the Foreign Minister in terms of the bigger questions, foreign policy questions, partnerships, etc. And we will try and respond to, we'll try and bring you in. You mentioned the nature of power has changed. You mentioned some of the assumptions are invalid. In your recent career, both as Foreign Secretary, then as a global corporate honcho, and now as a minister, what has been that single thing that has surprised you most?
Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious for someone right now. I would say it is really the changed approach of the United States. I would say I regard that as the most startling and impactful shift in recent memory, and because the United States in many ways is one of the fulcrums, the key fulcrum around which international affairs revolved. If they change their position, they change their approach, then it has a big resonance. And when I say they change, they actually, if you think about it, the US certainly from the 1990s had what you might call a sort of global project. Okay. At least for the last few years, the US has pulled back from it or shifted its perception of that. The US has invented the that part of the world which is covered by alliances. The United States has shifted its views and assessment of the utility of that alliance and the terms of that alliance in many ways. So I would again the world has some rules. I mean, we call it multilateralism, UN, etc. Not just UN, I mean the whole lot of bodies. WTO is a good example. The US positions on multilateralism is been very different. So a lot of my book in fact covers, I have a chapter called The Art of Disruption. It's a kind of takeoff on the art of the deal. And my case essentially is, right now this is an era where the US is really disrupting the world in order to get better terms from the world. But to that US answer, I would also add a second answer, because it's not a single event. I think the other is really the rise of China. So that whatever you might say, and that's a subject in itself.
No, but is that also something that's a black swan?
Well, I'm not sure it's a black swan.
The rise of China, it was happening over time.
Yes. I mean, to that extent, I mean, I think some people use the word grey rhino. Okay, but I mean, whatever the metaphor you might use, I would say the velocity and impact, because that of China and has been exceeded anything that anybody would I've seen predicted. So we do have to take both into account, and again, sometimes these terms don't really capture the complexity of the phenomenon in a way. So to me, these two would be the big events, the overarching events in which today a lot of world politics is running.
And what about at home? I would argue that outside the South Bloc, or maybe in spite of the South Bloc, India has changed dramatically as well. I mean, and this is no value judgment here. We have changed as a lot, as a people, as a society, as a community. What is that single biggest change you have seen as someone who has been taking India to the world, about India?
Well, look, I mean, in a sense you are right. Again, my contention has been, in many ways, the changes have been in the making. It's a question of whether we pick it up quickly. And I've actually said in the book that if you look back on it, the Indian street has been much more sensitive or much smarter about that change than Lutyens' Delhi. That if you see, where do you trade, where do you travel, where do you educate your children, so what are the key relationships for you? I think the Indian street has actually been very smart, and even in its skepticism about countries, the Indian street, for example, intuitively recognized the enormity of the cross-border terrorism which is coming out of Pakistan. So I would actually, as I say, argue it's a kind of an elite street dichotomy there. But when it comes to South Bloc, because you used that term, I would say, look, South Bloc has actually been fairly good at sort of going with that change. After the breakup of the Soviet Union, trying to readjust our relationship with the West, very much in the lead on the nuclear deal, which was an inflection point. So I would say I wouldn't put South Bloc there with Lutyens' Delhi. I would say South Bloc did frankly very much better, and I was part of it, so it's a very self-interested statement. When you ask me what has changed in the country, I think what has changed in many ways is a certain mindset, a certain practicality which has come. So today when we look at foreign policy, we link it much more to the security of the country, we link it to economy. We are much more conscious about delivery, practical delivery, whether it is on passports or whether it's in projects outside. Much more in tune with the aspiration to project our personality, to the yoga, International Day of Yoga would be a good example. And more than that, I would say, if you take a strategic posture, a sense that, look, there is what has changed today is a understanding that strategic autonomy should not be confused with strategic ambiguity. That we need to be decisive, there will be challenges. It's not enough to debate choices. Sometimes we need to make choices. I think that sense is there much more now than it was before.
So you, so how many years have you spent in the South Block?
Well, I first walked in about 43 years ago, in 1977.
And that is why I can see a degree of, defiance or defense of that particular building, because I want to go into your book.
Okay.
Your first chapter.
Okay.
It's about lessons from Awadh.
Mm-hmm.
There you don't seem to be so sanguine about the Delhi Darbar. There you have actually, in that particular chapter, you evoke the imagery of the Shatranj ke khiladi, of the
Absolutely.
Of the board players as the world changed outside. How does that square up, and what is that? What are you trying to convey through that particular, big entry into your book?
Well, I have seen the film. You've seen the film. I'm sure many of the viewers have seen it. I think the first message I'm trying to convey is, don't be strategically complicit. That the world is changing, there will be more opportunities, but there will be more risks, possibly the risk element would be more. Therefore, if you look at our history, there is reasonable grounds to assert that we have not always been as cognizant of international politics and what it means to us at home. So it's a kind of, if I were doing an American version of that chapter, I would say, instead of lessons of Awadh, I would say, wake up and smell the coffee. That there are changes out there. We must not be oblivious to that. Many of the changes are exactly what I said before. The US and China are two examples, but there are many others as well. So that's, I think, part of it, and it's also a sort of exhortation to be more proactive. So this is, in a sense, I'm talking to myself. In a sense, I'm talking to the rest of the country. And it's a collective sort of messaging. And again, I'm not defending South Block as a long-standing tenant of the building. I'm quite self-critical, sometimes perhaps a bit too much. I would say that, look, if there's actually any part of the government which has, smelt change, anticipated it, saw it coming, a lot of that has been in South Block. But having said that, I think there's always room for self-improvement. But there is also a larger, I would say, collective. You use Delhi Darbar, I'm using Lutyens Delhi. I guess we mean the same thing.
So, before we invite some of your other friends from around the world who have also sent some messages and are sharing some thoughts on your book, I wanted to ask one question that's in everyone's mind. You, I believe, have a foreign ministers meeting with the BRICS tomorrow.
Yes, virtual.
Virtual meeting.
Yes.
I think, and then you're flying to Moscow for a SCO meeting.
Yes, the week after.
Then I'm informed by a very knowledgeable journalist on Twitter that you are hosting a Quad ministers meeting.
Well, we are talking about a Quad ministers meeting. I don't think we made a decision on either the location or the timing as yet.
No, but let me ask the question. How does this square up? SCO, BRICS, Quad, that's, I think it's a curious combination of the minilaterals or plurilaterals, but more importantly, I would also like you to tell me, when you meet the Chinese foreign minister twice, once virtually, once in the real, how would the conversation go?
Well, you said it's a curious combination of groupings. It's a curious world. It's a world where, as I said, you have relations with different parties. Sometimes they may not all be on the same page or have the same interest. But if you are really looking at a multipolar world and you are talking convergences and you visualize that a lot of your understandings with people are on issues, then we will have different combinations. I mean, this is, in fact, I mean, I'm happy you sort of picked up those examples, because this is exactly the point I make, which is to be in SCO, to be in Quad, to be in RIC. You know, there are other trilaterals. There's a trilateral, by the way, called J as well. J. So this is the world that we all need to understand and come to terms with, and not make it a zero-sum game between that. As to what I will be talking with my Chinese colleague when I meet him, I mean, we've known each other a long time, so you can have a reasonable guess.
Okay. So we will now move to the messages that have come in for the foreign minister from some of his other colleagues around the world. We will hear them out, and then we'll come back and discuss some of the questions they have posed to you in there.
Thanks.
A few words in appreciation of your book, The India Way, Strategies for an Uncertain World. I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person. I was in India last January, but, well, we all know the reasons why people aren't traveling at the moment. I hope I can come again soon. So The India Way is a fascinating book, and there's no one better to explain how India's place in the world has developed and will develop than Subramaniam. He's been foreign minister, ambassador to the US, to China, Singapore, Czech Republic. So he's at an ideal perch or perches in which to view the world as it develops today. And in the book he describes how India is of course a power today and would probably have reached those heights even sooner were it not for the legacy of partition, slowing economic reforms and the nuclear question. But the fact is, India is a power today, and an important power, and therefore it's absolutely vital for all of us to understand where it's been, where it is, and where it's going.
Now you have to put the clock here.
What Subramaniam does, I think, brilliantly is set out in the decades to come the things that are going to determine India's place in that world and the alliances it needs to build and the values that should bind it to the rest of the world. India, of course, is fascinating for many reasons. It's the world's largest population democracy. It's a center of culture and civilization that goes back thousands of years. It's interesting from an economic standpoint today, particularly around the technology sector. And in its geography, with China next door, it's of course absolutely pivotal to how the world's geopolitics develop. So in this book, Subramaniam helps us understand the choices that India has to make and how it develops these strategies in this uncertain world. And he does so with acute observation and excellent writing. So Subramaniam, I am absolutely thrilled to say these words in support of the book. I know what it's like having written my own, the mixture of excitement and anxiety that accompanies the launching of a book is taking you 2 years to do, but it's work that's been well worth it. So please, everyone, have a wonderful evening. Subramaniam, congratulations on a fantastic endeavor and good luck with all the sales. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone, and my congratulations to you, Dr. Jaishankar, on the publication of your book, The India Way. For those who know the minister, no one will be surprised that the book is a rare combination of intellectual and conceptual depth with wide-ranging real-world experience. In a world where we are witnessing a transatlantic alliance that is disrupted, divided, drifting, and racked with doubt, and a rising China that is increasingly belligerent and aggressive, the entire world is really looking to see what kind of role India wants to play. My question for the minister would be this. In the next generation, as India seeks to achieve its national interests and its national ambitions Is it capable of doing those things largely through its own strategies and its own efforts? And if not, what are the essential partnerships for it to be able to do so? I think I'll leave it there. I just want to once again congratulate you, Minister Jaishankar, on what I think is an important book. And we wish you all great success with its sales.
Congratulations to Dr. Jaishankar for this very relevant and timely book. If it was not already evident, this book certainly highlights that he's as much an academic as he is a diplomat. And these are, of course, the two faces that have been there prominent through his illustrious career as a diplomat for a long time at the most interesting locations in the world, as now as a lawmaker and, of course, minister for the government of India. Many of us have a profound interest in the foreign policies and international orientation of India. It's a country that is emerging, that will be increasingly relevant on the global stage. And I think we'll all benefit from his analysis as a thinker and as a policy practitioner. We are at a unique juncture. We can say that we are all lost. Lots of changes in power relationship and technology relationship were changing even before COVID. But then, of course, COVID have accelerated and to a certain extent changed the different aspects of the previous great liberal global order that we used to have. As a growing power, India has choices, political ones, economic ones, technological ones, and the choices that India will make will have an impact on all of us. And as the European Union and other European countries deepen their economic and political ties with New Delhi, we will increasingly seek to understand where India is heading and the motives and the details and the orientations that will guide it in the important decades ahead. And this book will be an important help to us all trying to understand and try to be part of that particular discussion. Before I sign off and once more congratulate on the book, just one question. How integrated will the digital domain be in the foreign policies of India? The digital issues will be even more important in the future than they've been in the past. And this has been accelerated by the COVID crisis. And India, as an emerging also digital power, will be a very important swing power on these issues as we look ahead.
I'm delighted that my good friend, His Excellency Jaishankar, has chosen to write and to write profoundly on the subject of India and India's foreign policy. I've heard him speak, I've worked with him, and basically I have so much admiration really for his cool calmness, very collected assessment really of difficult situations, of events, and so on and so forth. Together, we worked hard at developing our bilateral relations with India. And again, he brings really with him a lot of experience. And in this book, he does really provide what I would say is an inside knowledge really of issues that are really very pertinent and important, not only for foreign policy practitioners, but I think beyond. I believe that Jaishankar embodies really real diplomats' knowledge and real diplomats' analysis of very important issues, and I think this is all coming out here. India is emerging more and more as a global player, and the more really we know about India's policy and India's thoughts on policy, the more important it is. I think from that perspective, we really do have a real contribution here. From the United Arab Emirates, which has been a historical partner with India, where many, many Indians live and contribute. I'm delighted really to read this book, to see this advance copy, and to learn much more than I thought I would. So thank you very much, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this edition, which I know that knowing Jaishankar very well, I know that he's put all his love and knowledge into it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. And Subramaniam, I'm so honored and delighted to be able to say these few words in appreciation of your book, The India Way, Strategies for an Uncertain World. I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person. I was in India last January, but, well, we all know the reasons why people aren't traveling at the moment. I hope I can come again soon. So The India Way is a fascinating book, and there's no one better to explain how India's place in the world has developed and will develop than Subramaniam. He's been foreign minister, ambassador to the US, to China, Singapore, Czech Republic. So he's at an ideal perch or perches in which to view the world as it develops today. And in the book he describes how India is of course a power today and would probably have reached those heights even sooner were it not for the legacy of partition, slowing economic reforms and the nuclear question. But the fact is, India is a power today and an important power, and therefore it's absolutely vital for all of us to understand where it's been, where it is, and where it's going. What Subramaniam does, I think, brilliantly is set out in the decades to come the things that are going to determine India's place in that world and the alliances it needs to build and the values that should bind it to the rest of the world. India, of course, is fascinating for many reasons. It's the world's largest population democracy. It's a centre of culture and civilization that goes back thousands of years. It's interesting from an economic standpoint today, particularly around the technology sector. And in its geography, with China next door, it's of course absolutely pivotal to how the world's geopolitics develop. So in this book, Subramaniam helps us understand the choices that India has to make and how it develops these strategies in this uncertain world, and he does so with acute observation and excellent writing. So Subramaniam, I am absolutely thrilled to say these words in support of the book. I know what it's like having written my own, the mixture of excitement and anxiety that accompanies the launch of a book. It's taken you 2 years to do, but it's work that's been well worth it. So please, everyone, have a wonderful evening. Subramaniam, congratulations on a fantastic endeavour and good luck with all the sales.
It's going to be a very different UK.
Greetings, everyone, and my congratulations to you, Dr. Jaishankar, on the publication of your book, The India Way. For those who know the minister, no one will be surprised that the book is a rare combination of intellectual and conceptual depth with wide-ranging real-world experience. In a world where we are witnessing a transatlantic alliance that is disrupted, divided, drifting, and racked with doubt, and a rising China that is increasingly belligerent and aggressive. The entire world is really looking to see what kind of role India wants to play.
When I talk to my counterpart,
my question for the minister would be this. In the next generation, as India seeks to achieve its national interests and its national ambitions, is it capable of doing those things largely through its own strategies and its own efforts? And if not, what are the essential partnerships for it to be able to do so? I think I'll leave it there. I just want to once again congratulate you, Minister Jaishankar, on what I think is an important book, and we wish you all great success with
not,
its sales.
What are the essential partnerships?
Congratulations to Dr. Jaishankar for this very relevant and timely book. If it was not already evident, this book certainly highlights that he is as much an academic as he is a diplomat. And these are, of course, the two faces that have been there prominent through his illustrious career as a diplomat for a long time at the most interesting locations in the world, as now as a lawmaker and as minister for the government of India.
I do think
many of us have a profound interest in the foreign policies and international orientation of India. It's a country that is emerging, that will be increasingly relevant on the global stage. And I think we'll all benefit from his analysis as a thinker and as a policy practitioner. We are at a unique juncture. We can say that we are all lost. Lots of changes in power relationship and technology relationship were changing even before COVID. But then, of course, COVID have accelerated and to a certain extent changed the different aspects of the previous great liberal global order that we used to have. As a growing power, India has choices, political ones, economic ones, technological ones, and the choices that India will make will have an impact on all of us. And as the European Union and other European countries deepen their economic and political ties with New Delhi, we will increasingly seek to understand where India is.
One axis positioning, among different poles or different players in the global system. I think there are multiple axes at work here, and the fact is, in some cases it would be, economic, it would be technology, it would be power and influence. In some cases, there would be other connects. I mean, societal connects, connects of shared views on how life is organized. So I would not, certainly a country like India, which has such a long tradition of beliefs and faiths, somewhere in our vision of international relations, those do matter. In fact, I've actually deliberately devoted a segment of the book to ethics, and I've used the Mahabharata analogy really to bring out the relevance even today of ethics in international affairs.
So, Prime Minister Bill actually asks you, I think, a question that is perhaps most important for these times. He says that he argues that the world is digital.
Right.
He argues that India's story is going to be implicated by the digital.
Right.
And he, in a sense, asks you whether you are ready to be a foreign minister that plays in the digital terrain.
Well, a short answer, yes, I am, but the longer answer is I also have no choice. I mean, if we were, any of us were inadequately digital, I think the coronavirus has made us far more so. I mean, in fact, I find today I perforce conduct all my business digitally, and except with, you get into it increasingly. I mean, maybe I somehow sense that perhaps Indians have a natural talent for the digital mode of communication, but I mean, I've actually in the last 2-3 weeks, almost every week I'm doing a joint commission digitally. I've spoken to half the foreign ministers of the world in a digital format, and you slide into it, it's and even internally. In fact, our way of working has become, our lifestyle has become more digital. But I want to, sort of building on that, make two observations. One, if you look at the country, you just look at the last 6 months, okay? What are the two big, digital accompaniments, in a sense, consequences of the pandemic? One, that when it comes to delivering resources, finances, food, any kind of social benefits to large masses of our population. In fact, you could say more than half our population, 800 million people. We have done it essentially digitally, using digital tools. And if you look even at the tracing process, the fact I mean, think of it, we actually thought that one part of a solution in dealing with the pandemic is Arogya Setu. It shows you actually how naturally digital we have all now become, that we all download it in our phone, you sort of use it like you would use anything else in your life. So now the challenge for us in foreign policy would be, if this country, I visualize it as using more and more digital tools for the realization of the SDGs, in the pursuit of governance, in the delivery of services. These experiences can actually become a model or frankly even a business in the rest of the world. And if I were to give you an example, right now in Africa, we actually have a big project which is in the pilot mode, where we want to do both distance education and distance health sort of digitally. So I think that's where the world is heading, and I truly believe it's one area where we can show our strength. So for me, it's not just my own habits, not my office surroundings, not even my program with the rest of the world or my exports to the rest of the world. I see the world as a global workplace where trusted talent will be very important, and India can make a very big difference. And if it is really a more it's a knowledge economy, and it was already so before the corona, it will become more so now. So the world which I expect that awaits us will also make us much more digital.
And what about the geopolitical and the strategic aspects, nuances around what's happening? Are we ready to be part of the management of the rules around the digital world, technology, emerging technologies, IoTs, the future?
No, look, that's a good question. I mean, because when I wax eloquent about all the digital opportunities, I would in fairness also say, with all of that comes the natural concern about digital security. I mean, you can't in life, you don't necessarily get, for every solution there's also a problem. This is therefore, to my mind, a new this is the new agendas which we will be looking at. Technology will be an agenda, connectivity would be an agenda, climate change would be an agenda. So when I speak on an uncertain world and global changes, I also want to say it's not just the power balance between countries. It is also the agenda itself has shifted, the metric of power has shifted.
You touched on a very important issue, and it's part of the big picture, the India way. The India way, what is going to ride on it? What is the India brand you're taking out? You mentioned telemedicine, telehealth, but what is actually the brand that now we want to take to the world, that you as a foreign minister are presenting to the world, the India proposition?
Well, let's start with the brand, okay, and then we'll come to the proposition. I think one obvious brand is our democratic credentials. Now, you could argue that it was always there, it was there from 1947, but I would counter that by saying, actually in many ways the world values democracy much more now, 70 years later, than it did then, because at that time the Cold War era, the strategic law, the compulsions of the Cold War era led even democratic powers to put aside their own values and principles in the pursuit of that particular agenda. But if I were to take that to the develop other than the democratic sort of credentials of India and a democracy constructed in the most challenging conditions, the second I would say point of our brand which I think is a sort of 1990s development, and I'll tell you an interesting story here. I once had a conversation with former President Kalam, who I had known well from his DRDO days in Singapore. Okay. I was High Commissioner there, and we talked about what has changed the global perception of India. and some of the answers were obviously economic, some of it was nuclear tests that happened by then. But I think he had this view, and which I agreed with, which was that, look, at the end of the day, people believe today in the techie Indian, that you could say it was a post Y2K phenomenon, but this global perception of the Indian being tech friendly, digital friendly, it actually
the engineer, the
Indian engineer, and that has had actually an enormous resonance. I've encountered this, in the US, for example. When I first went to the US, which was in the early 80s, the image, the brand of Indian were really small businessmen. Okay, there were kiosk owners, and there were people who were running motels, small motels. Today, look at the brand of India. US is very pronounced, but it would apply to Canada, it would apply to Europe, it would apply to Australia, and many East Asia, Singapore, Gulf. The idea that the Indian innovator, the Indian creator, the Indian financial analyst, the Indian doctor. So there is actually, in a sense, a sea change in our collective perception outside, and with every opportunity that gets strengthened. I mean, right now we have come through Corona. Okay, I think in the minds of a lot of people, I would have had conversations in this period with more than half the foreign ministers of the world. Okay, and in many cases it had to do with their requirements for medicines. So this sense of India as the pharmacy of the world has grown. Okay, also I'd referred earlier to yoga. Okay, that sense of India as a culture, a civilizational society with a strong culture, heritage, tradition, that has grown. So you need to connect all these dots. It is democratic, it is partly tech friendly, it is it is the ingenuity of the people, it is the Indian ability to handle multiple identities. And what it does, to my mind, is all of this fuses and somewhere creates a degree of, I'm not sure what's the right word, either comfort or trust. People are comfortable with us, and in fact, I make that remark saying this was one of the observations which actually Lee Kuan Yew made many years ago, that people are comfortable with us.
So we have perhaps 10 minutes.
Okay.
Because I'm going to extend it. We lost a bit of time because the movies ran a bit longer. The presentations ran a bit longer.
Sure.
I want to ask you, I want to take some time on China.
Okay.
And I want to then ask you a personal question at the very end. The part on China. Is China in India's way?
Sure. Well.
Okay. Let me explain.
No. It's a fair question. It's a fair question. And my answer would be read the book. You'll get the answer. Okay. So let me explain it, since we are talking about the book. We have a history. Okay, we have a long history, and we have a history which is, by the way, very good in many parts, very indifferent in some parts, and very difficult in some parts. Okay. The problem is, the more difficult parts are more recent. So what I essentially narrate in the book is they tend to sort of be an overlay on the earlier parts. Now, right now, you and I both know, this is not the easiest of times in the relationship. Okay, but I have taken in the book a long view, deliberately. And by the way, the book was written before before the Galwan incident happened. I've taken the long view, and essentially the working proposition is, you have here these two civilizational states, the only two civilizational states who are actually going to enter the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, most other big civilizations didn't make it. And we are not just two civilizational states, we are also the two countries in the world which are 1 billion plus. So to my mind, and I again, please don't get me wrong, I am not underplaying the seriousness of the current situation or the actually the challenges of the boundary question. I am making the point that it is imperative, it is vital for both countries to reach an accommodation, not just for them. I mean, I think the world has a lot riding on it. Now, as I said, I am also conscious that right now you have the situation that we do in the borders areas of the western sector. And here again, because we have the long view, our position there has been very, very clear that look, we have agreements and understandings with China. They must be, the agreements and understandings must be scrupulously observed by both parties. Neither party should attempt to change the status quo unilaterally. And the reality is what happens in the border will impact the relationship. You cannot separate them. So having said that, I made this point a few days earlier in another context. I would say that I am totally convinced that the solution to the situation has to be found in the domain of diplomacy, and I say that with responsibility.
So can I just dig a little deeper? In fact, let me add two layers of questions. The first is, are we unable to communicate both with each other and with our own people? That's the first part. The second part, if we don't get this conversation right, the American term for it is Himalayan Cold War, perpetual contest and tensions. The Russian term for it is hot peace, some cooperation but some conflicts. How do you see this unfolding over, say, the next decade?
No, I am not comfortable with any of the terms or the analogies or the similes that you have laid out. I do believe that we have to work our way through this. Again, I am not underestimating the challenges. I am very, being very realistic. I understand I am in touch with the ground situation on a regular basis. But I am convinced that the way out is through diplomacy. And that will happen if both sides understand that it is in their own interest that we don't see what we have seen this summer. This has not been obviously to the benefit of the relationship.
You had asked a question, you had posed a question in one of your conversations that I saw recently, that you don't know why there are 10,000 Chinese on the borders. And now, I see you as someone who belongs to the old school. You pose a question when you know the answer. So perhaps this is the occasion to answer that particular poser?
No, the answer is not for me to give. The answer is for them to give.
Okay.
I may have my view of their answer, but the answer still has to come from them.
Great. So I want to really, there are 200 odd questions and I can't bring all of them in, although you have responded to most of them on China, on Quad, on the US relationship that Sumit posted, and I've seen a number of our friends who have put in a lot of questions. I really want to draw your attention to one important area that we have not touched today. In fact, it's on your last lecture at Ramnath Goenka lecture. Luis Andrade Filho asks that you had mentioned South America as a battleground of ideas. Do you touch upon South America in this book, or rather how do you see South America implicate the India way?
Well, I haven't explored that in further detail in this book. Maybe you'll have to wait.
That's the second one.
Wait for the next one. But the point I would make is today we actually have a global footprint. I mean, global footprint in terms of where our businesses are, where our political relationships are, where our people are, where our leaders go to visit. And mechanism like BRICS, because it is transcontinent, has actually helped to expand that. So when often people ask, what are the utility of these mechanisms, it's a very, very good example. It is BRICS has actually, other than what it has done vis-a-vis the G7 at that time, it has actually helped to expand the networking of the BRICS countries across beyond their own continents. So the bit which I have developed there is that sense of India developing that larger footprint, as I say, from CARICOM. I mean, he said Brazil, but that it's really not that far. From CARICOM to the South Pacific, you have us from Mongolia to Angola. I mean, so this is a very different India, and it's an India which needs to therefore think very differently.
There's an important question that Barry O'Farrell, Ambassador, the High Commissioner of Australia, poses, that how do you protect the institutions from globalization itself? Can we protect the WHO? Can we protect the WTO from the
No, look, I'm not sure I agree with the term protect. I think institutions need to change. In fact, when I'm reading, I'm reading his question. His question actually says reformed.
Correct.
Okay. Reformed is very different. In fact, my problem is people are trying to protect, which means protect the status quo and not do the reform.
Okay.
So no, I think it's a very good question. I think it is imperative today we see reform multilateralism, whether it is the UN and UN Security Council, WHO, or you can make a long list, but the world cannot go on with in the global decision making councils, leaving out a country which will be the most populous, which will be the third largest economy in the near future, or it's not just about us, which will leave out 54 countries of Africa, all the countries of Latin America. So with every passing day, the multilateralism is getting anachronistic, and it is beginning to show. It showed during the pandemic.
So we have to finish very quickly, but I have to get one feedback from you.
Okay.
That's personal question.
Okay.
What should be the agenda for the next Raisina? I mean, I'm not asking you to do my job, but inputs help.
Well, I would say clearly the theme has to be a viral world.
In many ways.
Metaphorically and literally, because we will be talking, we should be talking about supply chains, we should be talking technology, we should be talking globalization, we should be talking what you did just now, multilateralism, nationalism. We should be talking rebalancing, not economic rebalancing, not just political rebalancing, but cultural rebalancing, intellectual rebalancing, so that this sense that somebody sits somewhere and judges everybody in the world, that can't continue either. So I think the viral world might be a good idea if you have better ideas.
Excellent. So we have to close now. There's another very important intervention at 9 p.m.
Yes.
The Prime Minister will be addressing many of us at the US SPF event. But let me thank the Foreign Minister for joining us this evening, for discussing in detail his work, his book, his viewpoints, his perspectives. And of course, let me thank him particularly for a very engaging conversation, frank conversation. I couldn't get him to take his mask off, but at least he gave us insights into how he views the viral world we try to navigate today. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.